Howdy, guys. How we doing?
Good.
Sweet.
Going
Aw-
on?
How's it going, John?
What's happening?
Awesome. It looks like we got everyone getting in here. Just wanted to kick things off. For everyone that is not familiar with me, my name is Ken Mulvey. I am the sitting board president, so happy to see some new faces in here. See a lot of guys that I know too and that I play with. But um, with that being said, just wanted to introduce myself. I started taking over the president position back in May after Pete Mancuso stepped down into a sitting board member role. But so this is kind of my first speaker series as an alumni, which is kind of cool. With that being said, just in terms of a brief background as for what the Alumni Association is, if you guys don't already know, we are a nonprofit organization that is our sole intent and purpose is to just promote UB Rugby and improve the overall player experience for all of you guys. So there's really two main avenues in which we've done that. Number one being financially, of course. The beautiful goalposts that are up at Ellicott, where a generous donation on behalf of the alumni. Fortunately, I got to play under those. As for your strength and conditioning program, for example, they've helped out with that this year. The Porta-Johns that are on the field, obviously that one's not as fun, but then also, of course, you guys have ran into some SA budget shortfalls and whatnot with travel, so we've been able to help out in years past with that. Yep, tackle pads, jerseys as well. So the list can go on from a financial perspective. But tonight it really touches on another aspect of the Alumni Association that Paul has really spearheaded and developed. So I'm going to give him his flowers. I haven't done too much for it, but overall, that's the professional development and networking side of things. He's really done a great job getting some notable alumni, one of which we have here tonight. Really excited to get to listen to Phil talk. But we've got a laundry list of guys that have really done well in their personal and their professional lives outside of UB. So this is just a great opportunity for you guys being college graduates, or excuse me, underclassmen, soon to be college graduates, entering into the workforce. It's a great opportunity for you guys to just ask these guys to have a wealth of knowledge in industries and fields that you're interested in. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Paul, though, and he can kind of talk about the format for the night. So thank you guys for joining.
Awesome. Thank you, Ken. And thanks everybody for making time for us this evening. So as Ken said, I started this program a couple years ago with the goal of connecting our alumni and our current players to really foster connections and open doors. As you make that transition from school to professional careers, you need all the help that you guys can get to find those opportunities. For those of you that are on, if you guys don't mind muting anybody that is just joining us, that'd be awesome. So this is episode number 3 of the speaker series. If you missed the previous episodes where we had Bob Swan and Jeff Umlin, we'll provide that link to our YouTube channel where you can go back and listen to those sessions. We've had engineers, we've had business folks. We're trying to bring in guests that are in fields that tie back to some of the academic paths that our students are taking. So really look for feedback for other speakers that you guys would like to have joining us here. So the format for this evening is to start with a quick introduction of Phil and kind of what he's done to get him to this point in his career and kind of the path that he took. We're going to talk about some of his experience when he was a student at UB and played on the UB rugby team, talk about his transition to a professional career as a data scientist working in AI, kind of things that he's learned and helped him be successful, and then kind of some takeaways and best practices maybe that he can pass on to our students. So I want this to be very informal and interactive. So please feel free to use the chat, ask questions. This is really for all of you to benefit from the knowledge that we have from our distinguished alumni. So with that, I'm going to open it up and do a quick intro of Phil. I know some of you may have seen that in the invites, but Phil was a chemical and biological engineer during his days at UB, graduating in 2014. He won a number of awards, including a prestigious Marshall Scholarship and the Barry Goldwater Scholarship. After UB, he continues education at Oxford, earning his PhD in 2018. Today, Phil's a computational scientist at the National Synchrotron. You'll have to help me there, Phil. Synchrotron light source at Brookhaven National Laboratory, where he develops AI and robotics. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. He's also developing AI for therapeutics startup on the side. And so he is a busy guy. He's also involved in nonprofit, projects as well. I know you recently moved, Phil, back to the East Coast after spending some time out west. So probably hopefully a good transition back to
it is the
closer
correct
to the
coast.
hometown.
I will go on
Good
record.
for you. So welcome, Phil. Happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So let's start off with your time at UB and going back like decade or so. Talk about how you decided to go to UB. How did you choose your major? Kind of what were some of those influences for you?
Yeah, I mean, UB was free or damn near close, which made the calculus pretty easy. I think I think a lot of the guys who end up in the club and at UB probably are smart enough to have other options, and then realize that there's a bit of a prudency to making a state school decision. So chemical engineering was similarly, it was, I liked chemistry. The people in my life who saw that, that was an interest of mine, they said you could go do a chemistry degree and you might get a job, or you can go to a chemical engineering degree and just take a few more classes, and it might be a little bit harder, but you'll have better job security. Which was good advice at the time, going to an 18-year-old kid. And as it turns out, people who end up getting engineering degrees don't actually end up always becoming engineers. They end up going on and doing lots of things. Engineering just being one of the avenues it's available. It's a hard enough program, and you learn enough skills that are transferable. That I have not built any of the chemical engineering, like reactor design stuff that I was trained to do at UB. Now I program computers, so not exact. I wouldn't call myself a chemical engineer by any stretch of a measure.
Yeah, we all start someplace, right? And where did you grow up? I know you're in the Albany area now. Where did you grow up originally?
So I grew up in the Hudson Valley, in Rockland and Orange County. I went to high school in Washingtonville. If there are any folks from that area of the world. And then but Buffalo became home. I think the moment I got there. And I think when I moved to England, I told people I was from Buffalo, not that I was from Washingtonville. And
awesome.
That stuck. Yeah.
And this is one of my favorite questions because everybody's a different journey. How did you start playing rugby?
Yeah. That's a good one. So I stopped playing high school sports when I was 16, because I was working instead of I didn't have time to do training stuff, and I just doing other kinds of extracurriculars. And so when I got to Buffalo, I actually wanted to double major in fine arts. So I wanted to do either musical theater or musical performance alongside an engineering degree. And Buffalo said you have to choose one, because it's not tractable to manage the schedule stuff. And they're like, "Oh, you should go do like the Glee Club or some shit." And a lot of people who had some friends who were in the Glee Club. As I went on, it's a fine thing for people to get up to, but I wanted something that was a bit more of a serious commitment. I wasn't going to step down from intensive degree program to recreational activity. And I used to work for a contractor who was always talking up rugby, and I was like, well, I was at like the Freshers Fair or whatever that like early first week of a freshman year. We were out in like the student union, and this table set up, and I saw a rugby table, so I put my name down on the list, showed up to training. I was 6 foot and $125, so I was a very, very skinny man. I wrestled at 125 in New York State for a long time, which is why I was that size. And And so I started out in the wing, and really started to fall in love with it. And I stayed in the deep three my entire time in Buffalo. And then I ended up leaving England as a prop in rugby league. So they
You
they
filled
they
out a
they,
little bit.
they enforced some body changes in me. It was a rugby league prop, so more like a loose forward body shape. But I left England. My last playing weight was 235, so I gained about 100 pounds from Buffalo to England in a couple years there.
That's a lot. You don't,
Yeah, well, my wife is now mad about it. But
you
it's,
don't look it. Yeah.
it's,
So I never thought I would welcome you to Prop Nation, but I can't wait to finally do it.
No, I still have never held a contested scrum. Let me be very clear. Let me be very like
Gotcha.
a rugby league prop is a different situation.
Don't downplay it, Phil. You're still in the club.
Yes.
Excellent. And what are your favorite memories? You know, what did you take away from your, experience on the UB rugby team?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. We used to talk up family in my ears. I don't know how the mottos of the chants have changed, but it's brotherhood was a big thing. I just got married quite recently, and a lot of the
Congratulations.
guys I graduated with, thank you, were at that wedding. There was and we've been tight through quite a number of years now. And these aren't guys I would have met doing other things, right? Some of us, we still play rugby together as of 2 years ago. I think I'm hanging up the boots at this point from a competitive standpoint. But I don't know if anyone remembers Kevin McKenna, Clown Baby. He's 35, and we had a 9-10 connection on out in San Francisco for a couple games. So that's always been a big thing. Obviously there's lots of memories that you can't really count. Some things you forget as well. But there was all those like hard-earned victories. Those games against Bonaventure, the tough to stomach losses that were still hard and stick with you, and some pretty wild socials. After you in general, after you leave Buffalo as a town, people don't understand what it means to throw a party. And after you leave Buffalo rugby, I don't think most people can't keep up with you. And that's I mean, that goes from Bill's Mafia being sort of the floor to some of the social activities we've gotten up to over the years. So it's those are
It's good.
some
It's good to
good
hear that
stories.
tradition has endured. So I would agree. It's a fraternity, right? Where it's a big fraternity for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. And your last time in Buffalo?
Oh, no, I mean a couple times. So we always try to go to at least one Bills game a year. So we went to
Good.
see the Bills Dolphins wild card game last year. We drove, or I guess it may have been 2 years ago, driving up from New York City. We almost moved back to Buffalo and not to Albany. So our rule was we had to move back to New York State. And so my wife was doing lots of job interviews around the state, and I knew I had sort of carte blanche on remote work. So we checked out Buffalo. She interviewed at Buffalo. They had an offer in Buffalo, Albany, and some stuff down in the New York City area, and Albany just had the right combination of factors. So we ended up here. So we might still get season tickets for the Bills. 9 weekends is a lot because it is like still a 4-hour drive. But I'll definitely see
Stay
at least one
connected.
game.
You're still connected. Awesome. Good. So let's make the transition to post Buffalo. You went on to grad school. What was your plan there? What was your focus? Kind of what did you want to get out of that experience?
Yeah, I think I tell a lot of people I got a PhD in rugby, and I played chemistry for fun while I was at Oxford. That for better or for worse. But a part of my Marshall Scholarship was an essay on my ambassadorial potential was the phrase that they used, right? I had to describe, and I was like, I'm a scientist. I'm not an ambassador. But I said, well, I'm going to go to England. I'm going to play rugby, and I'm going to go to pubs, and I'll probably make more friends than all the other nerds who are going to get the scholarship, and that worked. And that's what I did. So my goal was to go and play rugby at a different standard, essentially have a another couple years doing that, and then obviously, Oxford is not a bad school, right? So coming away with an Oxford PhD is not a trivial thing, but the I wanted to really enjoy it, and I ended up staying for about 7 years in the UK. So I didn't leave immediately. I played at Oxford, and then I played up in Liverpool, and um, I really enjoyed the time there.
What was the biggest difference, with style of game? Obviously, you mentioned a different position, prop versus wing.
Yeah.
Like besides that, what? And
So
there's also I played a men's club team post Buffalo, and in my mind, there's no comparison because Buffalo rugby was always for me as much social as it was sport, and then sometimes that shifts a bit when you leave.
yeah,
Sometimes it stays the same depending on the club.
I think when at least the 4 years I was in Buffalo, we were pushing that D1 squad. We had that national ranking while I was there, so we were still training. I'm sure you guys are still training 5 days a week. I know you guys have SNC now. The baseline standard is better, right? You don't have any guys like me who are walking onto rugby for the first time being like, I know how to play a sport. I'm a wrestler. I'm an ice hockey player. I'm a football player. Give me your
Yep.
ball. I'll learn how to pass back. Like, no one's learning how to pass backwards. No one's learning how to tackle safely and correctly. So the baseline, I think, skill standard is a little bit better. So your average guys, but the baseline athleticism was just very high at UB and within the teams that we were playing against. And so I think that is something that I was able to exploit once I got to Oxford and started moving into rugby league, where the athleticism requirements are just a little bit higher. The ball's in hand a little bit more. You're sprinting back 10 at every tackle, and then moving into the line. You can get away with some weaker technical skills as you learn if you're willing to put in the athletic effort. And then the other big thing is, and which it's awesome that the team is getting this built up, is I did not have dedicated S&C coaching, strength conditioning coaching at Buffalo. I had Cameron McLaurin, who's an alumni of our generation, who would just wake up and go to the gym with me at 7 a.m. On a regular basis. And so, like, the buddy system was our S&C to some degree. Whereas at Oxford, right, I had an S&C coach. I had a nutrition plan. Right, the 100 pounds gained was deliberate. It wasn't like I just sort of let myself go. So that was a big difference. But we only trained 4 times a week. We played on Wednesdays and not Saturdays because that's when college sport happens in the UK. Wednesday is a sports day, and that made balancing the academic career somewhat difficult. Right, Saturday was not a rugby day for college teams, even at the Bucks, like the British University Collegiate Standard. Right.
Right. Awesome. All right, so let's talk transition to the working world.
Yeah.
Give me like day in the life, what do you do now? What kind of activities, what kind of deliverables? I think you said you're working remotely mostly now.
Yeah, so being in Albany makes things a bit more attractive. Robotics projects are hard to manage remotely because there are physical robots involved. So being back close to home, I used to have to fly in at least once a quarter for an extended trip to be hands on. Now it's more I'm in sort of striking distance, so I'm going in next week for 3 or 4 days, and then I'm coming back out, and it's just a quick drive or a quick train ride. Quick, but it's feasible. My day to day is really fun. So I had sort of a crossroads of deciding whether to go down the academic route of being a professor or going to industry. And the national lab system is a really nice place where you can sort of balance those two things, and kind of keep a foot in either pond there. And so I work at a Department of Energy sponsored user facility, and what that is these are multi-billion-dollar institutions that the Department of Energy builds so that other scientists or the research community can come and do science they just wouldn't be able to afford to do at their own home university, right? Like people are very familiar with CERN, like the big particle accelerator out in Switzerland, and you see it in pop culture and in Dan Brown's books and the God particle and all these things, right? These kinds of particle accelerators are resources that lots of researchers need to use, but everyone can't have one in their own backyard, right? It's just too expensive to build. So a synchrotron is actually a different type of particle accelerator. So we have an electron accelerator that spins electrons around and around and around. At little edges of the circle, we wiggle the electrons. They shoot off interesting light that generally X-rays that are, either very high flux, like very, very bright, 3 times brighter than the sun kind of brightness, or very tuned to a particular energy. And then people can do downstream science with that kind of stuff. And so what I'm doing now is building sort of the software architectures for the next generation of those experimental end stations that we call beamlines, for users to come in. And so right now I'm embedded in sort of a 5-year project with the Department of Energy, leading that software architecture. And prior to that, I think somewhat alongside of that, just sort of working on my own research projects in sort of AI and robotics for these kinds of experiments, right? How do you get a robot to sit down and do the experiment overnight while you're not there? How do you make intelligent decisions in an automated fashion about your experiment, about your science as you're going? Because this is a very precious resource, right? The Department of Energy, taxpayers, you find people, or some of you find people,
Some of you with jobs, yes.
Yeah. And they want a return on that resource, and so on that taxpayer investment. So it's important that we actually get good science out of these facilities, right? One of the Nobel Prize winners in chemistry today, did some of his experiments at the light source, right? Because it's the only place to do those kinds of experiments. So this is really exceptional resource for the research community. And so it's really fun to be involved in that, but you also have to make really economical use of that resource. So the lights are only on sometimes, but so generally speaking, when a research team gets, you write a proposal, you get time. Nobody pays for time, right? It's not something, that the DOE is charging for, unless it's an industrial member coming in. So you get 2 days, or you get 3 days, maybe you get 12 hours to come to one of the experimental end stations, do your experiment, and get the hell out and make room for the next person to come in. And so when you have 72 hours to do an experiment, and you only get to have those 72 hours once a year, maybe twice a year, you bring an army of PhD students, and you work around the clock. You work 3 shifts a day. And that's not, it's sort of a rite of passage for some of the people who work on this kind of science, but also it's not necessarily the best way to make the most informed decisions and best use of time, especially when we have computers that make really good decisions. And now we can have robots who can start to automate some of these experiments so that you don't have to be hands-on throughout the entire process. And so that's a lot of the work that I've been doing is accelerating these kinds of experiments, closing that decision-making loop, or providing, even just better, more informed scientific decisions that's based on the analysis that's happening sort of on the fly, and embedding that kind of ideology and technological capacity into these next generations of beamlines that we're building. Because these are, it takes 5 years to build these things. It takes 10 years to build out the synchrotron itself, right? There's a long runway for any of these big DOE projects. So you want to make sure what you decide that you're going to build today is going to meet the needs of people in 5 to 10 years, when it actually starts to make that impact.
Yeah, and it's a good segue to, one of the reasons I thought having you as a great speaker was, and you're in that AI space, you're in robotics. Besides hurricanes, it's a very topical subject these days, and I'm sure our team, the players, are thinking about AI, and I'm sure it's getting introduced in your curriculum at UB. So what's, when people ask you about your perspective of AI, like what's your kind of, elevator response to how you think it's going to affect our lives?
Yeah. This definitely comes up a lot. It's classic cocktail conversation now, but technology is always easier to weaponize than it is to productionize for human benefit. I think we think about the hydrogen bomb we've had for 70 years, right? We've been able to do fusion at a scale that will eradicate human life for 70 years. For about, I don't know, a year and a half, we've had ignition for like feasible ignition for a fusion reactor, and that's still not even close to actually generating power with fusion. These problems to do things right and to do things in a way that bring human benefit are generally harder, right? The technologies that we use to make new vaccines, to make new medicines, can just as equally, I mean, these are AI accelerated technologies, right? Can just as easily be weaponized to make new bioweapons. And people are acutely aware of that. And this goes down all the way down to even simple things like I'll speak to algorithms in general, right? The algorithms for the infrared sensors that turn on the hand dryers in bathrooms didn't work on Black people forever because there weren't any Black engineers who were working on the problem, and nobody asked the question, is this going to work if my hands aren't white? And like that was a real problem that people who built these products had. Now that's it's a pithy example, right? Going from hydrogen bomb to hand dryers not working, but all throughout the technology chain, it's very easy to be to weaponize. It's very easy to be oversightful. And so with respect to AI, we have really amazing opportunities. I'm very optimistic about what can be done with it. But I'm also acutely aware of the inherent dangers that go from the benign and trivial nuisances all the way up to the weapons of mass destruction. I am in a very fortunate position at the Department of Energy that I don't have to work on weapons for our government, and that makes my life and job pretty easy because I don't have to deal with too many ethical conundra each day in life. But it is something to be cognizant of once you know how these technologies work after work.
Yeah, well, the other concern, my world, I work at Dell, and I work in some projects that are getting into the AI space, is the power consumption that's going to be required.
Yeah.
So I heard a stat today that something like the amount of gigawatts required to run kind of this basic analysis was equivalent to the amount of power the city of San Francisco needed. It was like
Right,
unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Microsoft is now investing in 3 Mile Island as a nuclear power source to find alternative ways to power their AI, needs.
Yeah,
So
countries are building plants
Yeah.
specifically to support GPU consumption, and whether
Yeah.
it's for AI training or the whole blockchain mining is other energy consumption thing. But that's a real concern, right? What is the value? What's the cost benefit associated with training a slightly better model if the energy consumption is so great?
Yeah, definitely some ethical concerns there. Let me take a pause here. We've been talking for a bit and see if our students have some questions, the players. I'm curious if any of you guys are taking classes in AI, in any of these related fields where you're starting to get exposed to some of these types of technologies and topics.
I got a question. It's more about stuff after undergrad. I'm
Sure.
an engineering student. I'm in my senior year. What do you think is like the benefits of going to get your PhD, or I want to pursue my master's here at UB? So, what is something that you would like? What's your advice moving towards a higher education?
The benefit of a PhD it's twofold. One, you don't have to pay for it. That was a big piece. It is free, or it's funded. It's an opportunity to do something really interesting and fun. And depending on your discipline, there are a lot of industrial players who are still lagging behind on how they do promotion schemes without having a PhD. So I'll give a good example here. If you're in aerospace, one good buddy of mine, he works for SpaceX, and brilliant guy, has a master's degree in global governance and diplomacy built around space law. Has another master's degree around autonomous drones. security clearance in both the US and the UK, interned for Boeing all of undergrad and while he was in the UK. And then they wouldn't give him a research track job because he didn't have a PhD. And then they lowballed him on salary because he didn't have a PhD. And you know, Elon Musk gave him a much better job out the gate because it's a bit more contemporary. Some of the national labs, I mean, BNL just changed their policy in my tenure there, where you don't have to have a PhD to reach the same career trajectory as someone with a PhD if you're doing research. There's no reason why. So there is an argument from a career progression standpoint. From a, I mean, I essentially had 8 years of undergrad, in my opinion, right? I did research while I was an undergrad. I did research while I was in Oxford. I played rugby all 8 years, and I had a really good time doing it. It was an enjoyable experience. That's probably the best answer to do it. Do a PhD because you're going to enjoy doing it. The benefits to a PhD financially don't actually exist that much. If you want to be a professor and it's the only way for you to do your thing, sure, but the financial benefits are not that substantial, especially given the opportunity cost associated with that. But if you want to do research and development, you got to have a way to break into that work. And that's not easy to do with just an undergrad degree, unless you had like certain internships or other pieces that start to get your foot in the door there. So there's a lot of cost benefit analysis to do, considering a PhD. I also, I quit my first PhD. I fucking hated it. It was horrible. It was a whole dystopian nightmare. I was only able to get out of Oxford in 4 years because I did my second attempt at a PhD in 2 years and 8 months. You will not do a PhD in 2 years and 8 months in the US. You will do it in 5 to 7 years. And so like the risk of I started a PhD and I hate it is much greater. Whereas, the fact that I could get 6 months into a PhD and be like, nah, this isn't for me, I'll figure out something different. It was a real sort of privilege and opportunity that was different. So there is a risk there, but there's also, in US PhD programs, you can walk away with a master's degree. You can get a little bit into it, get your master's and walk away. So there's a lot of trade-off there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no stress.
Do you think there's benefit in working a couple of years before going to grad school? Does that?
100%.
Yeah.
So in my team now, I am more excited about hiring folks who are fresh out of undergrad or as interns, or we have what's it called, STAR program, a program where we get active duty service members who are coming back and want to upskill, and so they can do their last so like the last segment of their tour in a national lab upskilling, and then you can sort of transition them to full-time roles if you have it. But people who can do things in most of the world are much more useful than people who can think about things. So practical skills are far more useful to me. I mean, even both at the national labs and at the biotech, right? People with PhDs in computer science, they are really clever. They're absolutely brilliant, and they can do some really, really cool stuff, and think about some cool problems and make some amazing advancements. But sometimes you just need to build a product and ship it. And a PhD in computer science is more worried about the asymptotic complexity of the algorithm sometimes than they are how useful the interface is going to be, or how to spin something up in a containerized suite, right? So there's a balance there. So the only risk is I don't know a lot of people who manage to go into the workforce and then we're comfortable giving up on their salary to go back to school. That's it's a lot easier to be like, oh, I'm a broke undergrad, and now I'm just a slightly less broke master's student or PhD student, and it doesn't feel as tough. But yeah, once you get that first paycheck or you have new bills, people are like gases. They expand to meet their budget and they expand to meet the spaces that they live in. So if once you get a big paycheck, you just start to use it, and then it's hard to turn that around and be like, oh, now I'm going to be comfortable making less than a living wage so I can be a student again. So it is hard, but it depends what you want to do. And some
Right.
jobs will pay for it. You know, my job will pay for me to get an MBA if that's something that I want to do at this point.
Thanks. I see, does someone else have a question? I think I saw somebody come off mute. So you mentioned internships, so let's go back to that for a second, Phil, because I know that's going to be on the mind of our students that are underclassmen, you know, looking for some hands-on experience to get that first job or to figure out what they want to do. So are there opportunities through the National Lab, through your startup, through, you know, other suggestions that you might have?
Absolutely. So the National Labs has a program called SULI, which are SULI, which are internships that exist mostly in the summer, but also throughout the year, that are national lab centric. So actually what you end up having to do is say, I want to do a project. My choices of labs are as follows. And there's 26 labs in the US. So, and you're not allowed to choose the same lab twice. So you can't choose 2 departments at BNL because you want to live on Long Island. You can't choose 2 departments at Argonne because you want to live in Chicago. But it's a good opportunity to take a summer, and they're reasonably well paid, to go and, you know, live at Berkeley, live in Chicago, live in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and do some cool work. Now the types of work varies substantially, right? Folks in Los Alamos are working on particular types of problems, whereas, you know, folks at other labs have more of a wider net. So I strongly recommend those systems. The National Science Foundation, if you're doing researchy type stuff, have RAUs, which are research experiences for undergraduates, which are more research targeted. And then internships, I mean, a lot of things I think have, our best interns have always been internal connections. I don't know if I've ever had a hiring process where we actually ended up pulling an intern who didn't have an internal recommendation from the start. We've interviewed folks for sure. Or I've been on interview panels for folks, but from a startup standpoint, right? Interns are very expensive to carry. It's not like a large company where there's a sort of an organization and an infrastructure to bring in a class of interns. It's like, no, like there's going to be one person, and now now 10% of our team has to worry about managing that one person when they could have been writing code. And so you kind of want a value add there. So I think the majority of the interns that we've had at BigHat have been PhD level students who take a break from their PhD to do internships. And are, you know, they're choosing between this internship or an internship at Meta for more money, and deciding, right, do I want to do something interesting that might help people over, or do I want to go work on maps or chat for 3 times the pay grade.
So we'll get the link or some your contact information, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Definitely reach out
From our
And
students. Great. All right, let's keep it going. More questions here. This is for you guys. Fire away. What's on your mind? You know, those of you thinking about this career space.
Do you guys look for specific type of engineers, or will you just take like certain computer science engineering or chemical engineering? Like you said, I know
we got the whole gambit. Yeah, I mean, especially with the national labs and big user facilities, right? We have electrical engineers who are working strictly on controls. We have electrical engineers who are actually building devices. We have mechanical engineers who are working on right, the building a beamline is a large scale construction project, right? So it just becomes a very technical construction project. So we have civil engineers and mechanical engineers who are involved in other aspects of building these facilities.
So like, what is someone who is at your company who's a civil engineer? What does their day look like? Or like, what projects do they work on?
I mean, yeah, that's I'm gonna stretch my knowledge on what civil engineers actually do. I like they're glorified foremen with calculus. Is that right? But so they're working on a construction project, right? So they're working hand in hand with an architect with a construction team to build something. We build buildings, we build small hutches. Some of those, the experimental hutches are these, multi-million to billion-dollar investments, and they're lead lined boxes, and they have to be relatively vibration proof, some of them, right? There's a degree of specifications that have to happen there. Some of them have to be a quarter mile out of the building, so they need like a large tangent off the radius of the circle, and so then you have to deal with the whole civil engineering aspect of, okay, now I have to cut through a parking lot to go build a lead box quarter mile away. I have to run pipe through that or run pipe over that. I have to have, a foundation where my pipe that I can't shift. So the somewhat unique civil engineering, but nonetheless, it's still construction-based civil engineering is my understanding. To the extent that I understand what a civil engineer does.
Thank you.
But
I have a question.
Really?
What do you think is like the most needed type of engineer? I know it's kind of open-ended, but I'm just wondering.
I think electrical is probably the biggest regret I have from the curricula that I took, is that I've had to learn. So a lot of like the maths and stuff and the coding and stuff, like I learned as a chemical engineer anyways, but the stuff that's centered around electromechanics or mechatronics, right? So you think about robots, right? Like there's a lot that goes into that, where I've had to learn a lot of control stuff on my own time. And more you're seeing these kinds of base level integrations happening in it. I mean, you can't drive a car anymore that isn't a computer, right? I can't fix my own car anymore. The moment I buy a car that's been built in the past 20 years, it's a computer. It's not a car, right? So all of my ability to, I used to work on a drilling rig, not like a water well drilling rig, not a oil drilling rig. And I learned a lot about how to fix, large machines and cars and things. And none of that knowledge is useful to me anymore, because I no longer work on heavy machinery. And around my house, there is no heavy machinery that I can touch. So I think, baseline useful skills to have in life, you'll get more out of electrical engineering. No one's out here doing the whole Breaking Bad situation. So it's, you're both day to day, but even in the workforce, you're going to see more Internet of Things or integrated technologies into your workspace, no matter what you do. So that's a pretty useful set of skills to have.
Got it. Thank you.
I think I was just wanted to ask, how's balancing life, like going to school in Oxford and playing rugby at the same time? Because like it's a different level up there. So how's that?
Honestly, everything got easier after undergrad. Like undergrad was hard for me. Again, we at UB we were training 5 days a week. We were in, a handful of us at least were in the gym, trying to be 5 days a week, especially in the off season. I was doing a lot of research activities, and you do a lot, right? Once grad school is a little bit easier, I think, because you kind of have a bit more control of your own. You're really only focusing on nobody cares about your extracurriculars in grad school, right? You no longer have to have a resume or anything like that, right? It's just like, did I write the PhD? Did I do the job? I bounced around a little bit as well, but I found it pretty easy to balance after UB. Yeah, I mean UB's hard, man. Like you guys are in a good school. We all joke, like I think I might have been the only person in my friend group who still would have gotten in if we reapplied today. So I think the skills you get by play. This is another thing. Like I have a bias that I'm aware of. Like, but if I see someone who's applying for an internship and they write, I did varsity sports in college, I know for a fact that they can manage their time and that they work hard. Right? You don't really get that guarantee from a lot of people. It's the same thing with the folks we were able to hire in who were coming off their tours, from their active duty service, right? That they know how to work hard. That they know how to dive right in and solve problems. And that's saying a lot. And those kinds of soft skills and those soft indicators. I mean, I can teach you how to code in Python to the extent that I need you to code in Python for a project. I can't teach you how to work hard. Right. I don't have time to do that.
Good question. John, you had a question.
So this is, I guess, more on like the rugby side of like things. How would you say that like rugby in the UK like differs from rugby that you're gonna see in like Buffalo or in the States, or like how do you see the play styles are?
Yeah, it's safer. It's definitely safer to play in the UK. So the collisions are a lot cleaner because everyone's been practicing rugby tackles since they were 7 years old. Where we practice, if we practice tackles, I mean, you'll have a handful of people. We practice football tackles, and when I was 7 years old, upgrading from the into contact football, whenever that, I guess that probably was 7 to 10 years old, right? We were still going helmet to helmet. So you see a lot of wrestlers or in my day, I'm sure it's the same. A lot of wrestlers are converts to playing rugby in the U.S. And the reason is because they know how to do a double leg takedown, so they know how to make it like a field tackle. So that I broke my nose twice in as many months this year playing rugby out in San Francisco, just because people don't know how to manage their collisions, and myself included. I slip back into bad habits. So that standard was a little bit different. I think most loose forwards into the backs could walk onto a lot of U.S. teams and be a fly half. I played fly half in San Francisco. I'm not a fly half, right? My boot sucks. But there's a degree of technical skills there. But I think the biggest thing for me, especially when I was in the UK, like, because I moved around a lot, right? I was in Oxford, and then I was in Liverpool, and I was in London, then I was back up in Liverpool. I had like a partner out in Sheffield. I had a drinking buddy in Manchester, and you could go into any town and you'd have a good rugby club, and you'd always have 30 new friends. So like people talk about culture shock or moving around or having a hard time. Like I never had a lack of social life in the UK because no matter where I'd go, I'd find a rugby club, and then I'd have 30 friends. In New York City, in San Francisco, that was still pretty easy. I think out west, it's in some places it's pretty tractable, but in Albany, maybe there's a D3 squad that, I mean, if I was in Buffalo, I'd be playing for the BRC right now. My wife would be kicking me in the shins, being like, "You're not gonna have a face by the end of this," but I'd still be out with the BRC. In New York City, right? I was playing for the Village Lions. I was playing for the Gotham Knights, and the Brooklyn Kings Rugby League. So, yeah, see you on Saturday. Not a chance. But that's a big difference. Is like you can't move anywhere in the U.S. and find a rugby team, and so it is a bit harder in that space. Because even just to be out playing a bit of beer league, I say, Kevin McKenna, he flew out to California for a visit. He was visiting some girl. And I was like, actually, I got a game this weekend. It's preseason. If you want a pair of boots, you're welcome to walk on. He walked on, and we were throwing the ball around, and they relegated our scrum half to fullback and put Kevin in at scrum half. And it was just him and me playing 9-10 for a game, just because we knew each other for a decade of playing. So the standard is definitely a little bit different. And I think the ability to always have a rugby club, and I've been spoiled because of New York and San Francisco, and obviously Buffalo, but it's not a guarantee, except for certain pockets of the U.S. You're going to find a rugby club.
Yeah.
But also, we should stop playing after 30, man. Like my joints in the face are getting rattled.
So, like, how's Gotham actually? Because like I know some people actually from Gotham. I know a few people from Gotham that play.
All right, so yeah, I'll talk a little shit. Gotham, so I played for the Village Lions, and I played a bit for Gotham. But when I moved to San Francisco, I played for the Fog just because it was such an iconic team. Because Mark Bingham. So folks who don't know, Mark Bingham is this guy who was on the flight on 9/11 that went down in Pennsylvania. So he's one of the guys who fucked up the terrorists and took the plane down, saved a bunch of lives that day. But so he was a rugby player. He was a gay rugby player from San Francisco, and so then now there's an international gay rugby tournament on a biannual basis every 2 years in his honor. We have a Bingham Cup token. Yeah, so that's the San Francisco Fog's like an iconic team because of that. They started this tournament, and it's that they're technically the second gay rugby team in the U.S. There was I think some team in D.C. was first, but the IGR, the International Gay Rugby teams, like these inclusive teams are actually really great social clubs. So one of the reasons I went to the Fog was they have a pathways program. They had 60 people who'd never played rugby before in their late 20s to early 30s. So after college, right, they're moving to a new city, and they had a training program to onboard them to a B-side And some of these guys, had never played sports before. And so their first, foray into sports is rugby. And so like that kind of culture was one of the reasons why I played with the Fog. None of the teams in New York have that. New York City have that. So I mean, Gotham's fine. I think what ends up happening is you get a revolving door of players who jump from team to team because they piss somebody off or whatever. But the teams in New York. I mean, I have lots of friends who still play in the teams in the city, but I don't have any stock in the game anymore because I'm not commuting down to play.
Yeah. Lewis, let's go to Lewis. Keep it going here.
Hey, I was wondering when you were at Oxford, did you play for a club team or for a school team? Because like I was just studying abroad, and I played for the school team, and it sounded a little bit different from how you described it.
Yeah. So you played for like the colleges?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a fair point. So they'll be able to color here, like Oxford's kind of like Hogwarts, but instead of 4 little clusters, there's like 32 or something like that. And because the standards a bit clear, every one of those 32 has their own rugby team or like college sports. So college is separate from like the larger university scale, and then some of those folks will go and play for the university. So I played at the university level. And so that was a bit more. So I played for. So I got my blue, so to speak, and that was a bit different. So playing colleges is much more recreational for the most part. I mean, some people take it pretty seriously, but
Yeah,
it's
where I was,
more beer league. Yeah.
Yeah, it was more fun then.
That being said, I never had a drink up with another team playing for Bucks. So for the Oxford Blues, right? We would travel all over the Midlands and up north. And because it was on a Wednesday, right, you very seldom had a proper drink up. And I think that's a crucial thing that, when you play for your county team, right, when I was in Liverpool playing for the Liverpool Rugby Club, where it's a men's league, right, you do still have drink ups on Saturdays, and that whole community culture is still there. But because of the way sport is on a Wednesday, and when you're playing rugby league as the Oxford team, you're kind of it's kind of like when Harvard shows up to Buffalo, like nobody really wants to fucking drink with them. So I get that. But it is also you drive 3 hours to go play a game on a Wednesday afternoon. You got to get back. It's not like you're not driving out to Binghamton and being like, well, enough people have couches. Like worst thing happens, we hitchhike back from Binghamton. It's a little bit different, but colleges is it's beer league. It's fun. It's I played sevens for colleges because it was it's a laugh, but our coach did frown upon us playing colleges because like this is how people get injuries before important matches, which is when you're in your late 20s, you only have so many big collisions in you a week, and so try to keep them limited.
You're a little wiser.
Yeah,
for sure. All right, well, we got about 5 more minutes. Any other questions before we sort of start to wrap this up? All right, well, let's kind of wrap it up with just any I guess any reflections on advice to our students. You've talked a lot about your rugby experience, which I think they really enjoyed. Just I guess professionally, in terms of I think you touch on one of the themes that is important to me for this professional for this networking, which is staying connected to your people and creating that network and tapping into that network. So I guess any sort of thoughts for our students as they look for internships, kind of look for that first career opportunity?
Yeah. So I mean, I joke a lot saying I got a PhD in rugby league and I played chemistry for fun in Oxford, but the rugby is some of the most important stuff in terms of those like softer skills or those non-explicit skills that bleed in. I often make the analogy about I've had a lot of coaches yell at me, especially when I was learning, do something, not nothing. Never stand in the back line and be like, I don't know what to do, so I'm going to stand still. if you don't know what to do, just pick a hole and run a straight line and hope the ball comes your way. Right. If you don't know what to do, just run straight. So doing something is so much better than doing nothing or sort of like freezing in the headlights. And that applies substantially in professional decisions and in work. It's very easy to say, I went off the rails, I did a really big thing, but I did the wrong thing. And you turn to your team or your manager or someone else and then like, that was dumb. Go change that. And then you learn something very different than I didn't know what to do. So I was just going to wait for this meeting for someone to tell me what to do. And professionally, like that is, you're dead in the water. It's just a tragedy. Rugby, that's the second thing. Rugby's hard. And doing hard things is a much better way to get like AI, for instance, or there's a lot of people who are jumping on AI or jumping on Bitcoin or jumping on the next fad that they have access to. But if you're working on a hard problem, it's very hard to be outcompete because not a lot of people are trying to work on hard problems. And so doing hard things generally pays off. There's a lot of get rich quick schemes or stuff like that, but like if you're working on a hard problem that other people are like, that seems like a pain in the ass, that's a good thing, right? You're defensible, you're in a good spot. So and rugby kind of prepares people to do that, right? It's not a trivial sport. It's not an easy thing to do. Acting and doing hard things is something that I often lean on, and I point at rugby as the motivator or the defensibility for why I can say, I can do that. Someone says, well, how can you work these hours? How can you push this limit? How can you deal with that schedule? It's like rugby, right? That it was easy then, or even if it was hard then, it's been done, so everything else is a little bit easier. And then Paul, you were bringing up the social aspect of things. Building camaraderie and building community is pretty much, I mean, that's what it's always what brought me to rugby, was what made me stay with rugby, was the community at UB. It's what ended up getting me into playing rugby league instead of rugby union at Oxford. It was the community that got built up there, and it's what brings me to any team that I play on now. Having that as a central focus is it makes everything else kind of easier, even the hard things.
Awesome. Well, excellent. I know most of the folks on this call are our students. I'm not sure than Fred, myself. We got Alex and yourself. But we have Parents Weekend coming up at the end of the month. I'm going to be there. So for our students, I'll have a chance to meet many of you in person. I've met some of you before, but the reason I'm coming is to keep promoting this this networking and this camaraderie and this community that we're building. And I think it's a pretty special one. I've been associated with it off and on for 40 years, and I want to keep it going. And look forward to having that conversation with you in a couple of weeks. We'll do another session in the spring with another speaker. So if anybody has any suggestions or any subject or major that they're interested in, speak up. And then I want to give a shout out to Owen. He's been helping me to facilitate opportunities as we come across those for internships and jobs and things like that. So I know the academic year is still young, but for those of you that are graduating the next year, continue to work through him and myself and other resources to open doors for you guys. So with that, I want to thank Phil again for your time, for your insight, for sharing your stories, and for your willingness to be a resource for our players. And thanks everybody again for your time tonight.
Yep,
absolutely. And feel free to reach out. I mean, you'll have my contact. If not, I'm eminently Googleable. And if I get a at buffalo.edu email, I do at least read it. So you can count on that.
Awesome. Ken, you want to say some final thoughts?
Yes. First, Phil, thanks so much for spending some time with the guys. They really appreciate it. Overall, guys, one thing I just wanted to make you aware of with Family Weekend, that's obviously October 26th. At this point, we've been sending out mass emails and whatnot to everyone in our database. But with that being said, please make sure that you're reminding your folks, especially for the underclassmen, like the freshmen and whatnot. Your folks are the ones that are going to want to come out most. With that being said, I'm going to try and make sure that a directory goes out, or at least a Google spreadsheet, so that you guys can fill out your parents' contact information, including their phone numbers and their email, just so that we can add them to that database and make sure that we're making sure that all of our mass email communications are going to them as well. But please make sure that they're coming out. It'd be really great to have a huge turnout. So with that being said, though, just keep your eyes peeled for the directory, and then get that information put into the spreadsheet, and I'd really appreciate it. But that's all I got. So once again, Paul, thank you so much for putting this together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
guys.
Go